It's time to talk Gonzaga basketball.
Get ready.
It's the Spokesman-Review Zags Insiders Podcast.
Here we go.
Here's Jim Meehan and Richard Fox.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Zags Basketball Insiders Podcast. Jim Meehan from the Spokesman-Review, cover Gonzaga. Richard Fox, TV analyst on Gonzaga broadcasts for SWX, KHQ. Foxy, another interesting week for the Zags. They go 1-1. They beat Oregon State bad, avenging a loss down in Corvallis, and then lose another close game. Theme of the season so far. At St. Mary's, 62-58. We're going to hit those two games, especially the Gales, for a lot of comments coming up. But let's start where we always do, where the Zags are in the polls, in the brackets, in the net rankings. Obviously not in the AP poll. They dropped out of that a couple weeks ago and will be further out after losing to St. Mary's. It'll be interesting to see if the Gales crack the top 25. I don't think it's maybe quite going to happen yet, but if not, if they keep winning, I think it's a week away. In the net, the Zags are, I believe, 13th now. So the loss to St. Mary's didn't really ding them that much. They've been in the 11-12 range. But that's 6 straight quad 1 losses for the Zags. They're 2-6 in quad 1, 3-1 in quad 2. St. Mary's is 22nd in the net. They're 3-1 in quad 1 and 4-2 in quad 2. So that's 7-3, pretty good mark for the Gales now. I'm not going to ask you, Foxy, to explain the net rankings. We went through that a week or so ago, and it's an impossible task. But the long and short of it is the Zags didn't fall too much in the net, which is one of the key factors that the NCAA selection committee takes in. Other teams from the WCC, Oregon State, Santa Clara, and San Francisco, all in the 60s. WSU has dropped to 96, a tough slide for them. Lost to Pacific, swept by Pacific. So as it relates to the bracket projections, the Zags are now at 10, according to Jerry Palm. That is, if not on the bubble, it's, its object is closer than it appears in the rear view. That is right there. St. Mary's is a 9. On3.com has Gonzaga as an 8, playing Baylor, a 9. That would be interesting since they opened the season against each other. Zags won that by 1 million. St. Mary's is a 7 in that bracket. And then the bracket matrix, which is a accumulation of 40, 50, 60 brackets, something like that. Zags are an 8 still, and the Gales are a 9. So where do you see the Zags in the national picture here, Foxy? Are they on the bubble or just fading in that, drifting in that direction?
I still think they're firmly in the NCAA tournament, but if we're looking at a trend, it sure feels like they're regressing or moving away from being firmly locked in. I mean, their schedule, they get a bit of a reprieve on Thursday, although I'm not sure how much, given I think it's they got LMU on Thursday, who's been playing better. But if they don't get some things right, I think we're moving in that direction, shockingly. But we'll talk about it. I think that should be the furthest thing from their mind, quite frankly, and I'd expect that it is. They've got to take care of some things in house. Everything else, if they can, everything else will take care of itself. But if they can't, I think that's a very real conversation here in 30 days.
Yeah, they have 7 losses now, which I just would not have thought would be the case. Maybe even at the end of the season, I don't think either one of us had them. I think I had them with 4 or 5.
No.
But 7 losses already. Last year I think they lost 8, 6 in the regular season, lost to the Gales in the WCC tournament title game, and then the end of the season loss in the NCAAs. Lost 8 in 2016. That was Domus's last year. 7 of those were regular season. That team had to win the tournament to get into March Madness, and they did so, and then went to the Sweet 16 and probably should have gone further, but lost to Syracuse, comeback victory by the Orange. So they're not where I think either of us thought they would be at this point. So we'll get to all the headlines about Gonzaga this week and next week. Obviously, a lot more on St. Mary's, the loss down in Moraga. The search for the clutch gene continues for this team. They are 0-5 in games decided by 6 points or less. That does not count 2 overtime losses by 8 points. So essentially, nearly every close game has gone the other team's way and not Gonzaga's. So, but first up, Oregon State, kind of a game fresh on their minds. They had lost in overtime at Oregon State. Like so many of these close games, they got ahead in the second half. I think they were up in the 5-6 point range with inside 6 minutes, and just the offense went dry. Defense didn't hold up. They got to overtime. Graham Ike hit a 3-pointer, and Ben Gregg hit a 3-pointer to get them to overtime, but then weren't able to take advantage in the extra session. Obviously, that was still in their minds. They came out. That's as complete a game as Gonzaga's had in a long time against a very capable, competent opponent. Oregon State has really struggled on the road in the WCC. That's been evident. But when that team is on, they can beat anybody in the conference. Offense, just electric. Scored almost easily at times. Defense, though, I thought was the bigger story. Hold that team to 60. Shut the guys down that torched them in Corvallis. You're talking Ratai, who I think had 29 in the first game. You're talking DeMarco Minor, who had a great second half against the Zags down there. Nate Kings, I believe it is, had 17, I want to say, in the first half, finished with 20 or so. Up at the Kennel, it was Ratai scoring 15, so just kind of an average night for him, or maybe even below average. Kings had 11 points, 3 of 8. Minor, 10 points, 4 of 11, 5 turnovers. I thought the biggest thing they did that they kind of keep harping about, guard your yard. They stayed in front a lot better in that game. So there wasn't the scramble to help and recover and, oh, you took my guy, I got to get his. And you know what I mean? It was more coordinated, more connected. Looked nothing like Corvallis. I think OSU shot 58% down there. What'd you make of the Zags defense in that game?
Well, I thought home cooking is good. Being able to play at home with that crowd was pretty fired up. And I thought it really helped Gonzaga's group right away. And it's almost reminded me of the Baylor game where really nothing could go wrong. I thought they overwhelmed Oregon State. I think the environment overwhelmed Oregon State. What's really fascinating with the Beavers, I mean, they're 1-4 in conference play on the road. I mean, at home they're averaging 87 a game. On the road, less than 73. Yeah. It's really bizarre, actually, given that they've got a lot of experience on that roster, but they just cannot take their game on the road. Obviously, Gonzaga shot the ball really well, better than 52% from 3, 55 overall. They made their free throws 85%, and then obviously Oregon State on the other end was just abysmal, sub 27% from 3, sub 40% from the field. Didn't hit it at a high clip from the free throw line. I think Gonzaga had a lot to do with that. Yeah. It felt like they were just more engaged. We talked about that Portland game, a week off. What was the response going to be? Could they put a number on the pilots? And they did, right? We said, check that box. Yeah. You've got a real basketball team in Oregon State coming in, and they just put a whooping on them. And Oregon State never got comfortable. It's a combination of lots of things. Oregon State sucks on the road. You're playing in a tough environment. And I think you had Gonzaga's attention. And the nice thing about, I mean, I don't know how many days it was in between, but I think it was less than 2 weeks from the loss.
Yeah, there's 12 days.
12 days.
12
Thank you.
days,
Yeah.
Fokker. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's fresh on your mind as a player. This is, as we'll certainly discuss the issues and challenges this group has. I don't think being competitive is one of them. And they were ready for that. So, I mean, just a really impressive game. I'm not sure how much it was such a blowout. I'm not sure how we can really break it down. I thought it was nice to see Battle, at least for a moment, revert back to what we thought he would be. And it's not just the production. I mean, certainly 23 points, 19 of those in the first half. I think Gonzaga was up 20. I mean, he was just very assertive, was knocking down shots, 3 or 4 from the game from 3, but more importantly, got to the line 13 times. It was more the way Caleb was playing. I think sometimes we can get caught up in the result, and that's important, but that's not really what I'm looking at when I watch a game. I would look at what's the quality of shot they're getting, because you're going to miss shots. What's the guy's body language? Is he playing aggressively or is he playing passively? Certainly, we've seen both ends of that spectrum with Caleb this year. He was on the aggressive side of that scale. And quite frankly, I thought that boded really well for Saturday night. Obviously, it didn't. And then, Michael put together back-to-back games. He was strong at Portland.
He did.
It was really good against Oregon State. 20 minutes, but 15 points, double-double, 15 and 10, 4 offensive rebounds, made a couple threes after knocking one down at Portland. So, we've had this a couple times with Michael. We think he's maybe turning the corner or maybe settling into what it is he's going to do or be for this group. So I think, I don't know about you, but I thought it was an A+ follow-up to that Portland game. And I thought to myself, St. Mary's had to have watched that and thought to themselves, this sleeping giant's kind of woken up. But certainly that's not what we saw Saturday night. But it was a very impressive performance against Oregon State.
It was, and it was the perfect lead-in to St. Mary's, because it was Tuesday. So they had all this time, all the time to prepare for St. Mary's. Gales played the next night. And if you watch the first half, it was kind of the grinder that you'd expect, St. Mary's, Santa Clara. And I think it was a 2-point game at half. And then you watch the second half, and St. Mary's completely dismantled the Broncos. Santa Clara did not score for the first 10 minutes of the half. Did not score. And this is a team that hung up, 103 on the Zag, or 2 or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a team that's got nice offensive weapons. They didn't score. And going back to the first half, it was 13 minutes. They did not score. And I think the run became 26 in the second half, zip, and 30-0 overall. And you could see they're going to be a handful, because when they're doing their thing, when they're guarding, when they're that mind-numbing efficiency on offense, beating you to death on the glass, hitting a 3 when they need to, they are a handful. And most times you're going to have to play that style. They're not going to let you get out and run. They're not going to turn the ball over and give you the easy buckets. They're going to challenge everything, and they're going to clean up the glass. That's their style. So to me, there was just a ton of anticipation going into that game. And I think I wrote it. If those teams play the way they left off in their last game, I mean, the way the Zags looked against Oregon State and the way St. Mary's looked, I think that St. Mary's game ended up 13 over Santa Clara. It was like a 25-point game most of the half. If they play like that, it may be as good as it gets in this rivalry. Well, they didn't play like that, but they did play a very typical hard-nosed, down-to-the-wire, physical battle on Saturday night. And can't say it's Groundhog Day for the Zags, because it doesn't happen every day. And it only happens in close games, it feels like. But, the Zags battled like crazy. It got down 14 in the first half. They go up four. I think four was their max lead in the second half. Look to have it, kind of leaning their way, kind of got the crowd out of the game a little bit, and then just unable to, had a even longer stretch offensively where they just were not, didn't look like the same team that played the first 10 minutes of the second half. That first 10 minutes of the second half is as good as they've looked in a while, in counting Oregon State, because this is a team that's borderline top 25 in the rankings. But the offense slipped a little. They turned it over. They, gave up a couple of threes. They gave up a couple of putbacks. All of a sudden they're down, and then we need a bucket in crunch time, and it wasn't there. Obviously, there's no simple answer here. We've talked it to death. Mark Few kind of addressed it after the game. It's kind of just a matter of hitting shots at the end of games, and it's not one thing you can point out. Sometimes it's the defense, sometimes it's the offense. Sometimes it's missing a free throw, sometimes it's missing an open three. If it was a simple fix, they'd have done it already. And we talked about using Caleb Battle in that situation. I was a little surprised they ran the last inbounds play for Caleb in that game. He had not had a very good night down in Moraga, and they were trying to run a little, they kind of had a stack and trying to run a curl around it on an inbounds, 5.5 seconds or so left in the game. And he got kind of picked off in the middle of the key. Ball goes to Graham Ike, and he airballed the three ball. Probably time there to, go to second option, get it to Ryan, get it to Caleb, eventually coming around, whatever. But that was pretty much it, because the Gales got fouled and they hit the 2 free throws at the end. You surprised by the last play, what they ran, and then just kind of this feeling that, until they win one of these, you just kind of get leery when they get into a tight game at the end of a contest, how it's going to go when they haven't been able to pull these out.
Well, if you remember, Ryan late there in the second half had to call a timeout. He kind of got stuck halfway up the key. He was trying to drop it off to Ike. So now you don't have a timeout. You don't know you're going to be in that situation, and they've got these types of plays already drawn up. So, but certainly I would imagine Mark would have loved to have a timeout there to draw something up that looked a little bit more organized. And, I'm going to go on a limb and say that I disagree with the assessment that you described Mark having, which is, it could be any one of these things. They can't guard anybody. You didn't lose the game because that last possession. You didn't lose the game because you had this turnover or this missed shot. They can't guard anybody. And I know that because they're zoning now. This is not Mark's deal. They have done zones in the past. We zoned when I was there because we knew we couldn't guard anybody one-on-one. We were slow, smart, but slow, and we had to try to keep guys in front. And we got really good at rebounding outside the zone. This group is having to zone because they can't keep anybody in front. And then on top of that, they're not used to playing the zone. And so you see time and time again, those rebounds Barrett had, those two in one possession, were enormous. I mean, St. Mary's is a good rebounding team. They had 14 offensive rebounds, which led to 9 second chance points. That's the equivalent of Gonzaga getting 14 and getting 18 points, second chance points, right? St. Mary's just plays so slow that they're not going to have as many opportunities off those offensive rebounds. They're just as content as to take that ball and let another 15 seconds go off the shot clock. So to me, it's all about their defense. I watched that game 3 times. I don't know what that says about me, but I was like, what? You can't guard anybody. And in the first half, it was just blow by after blow by. And then what's happening is guys are having to help constantly. Yeah. And so which
led to all those threes.
Leads to these threes. And then it's almost to the point where I think guys are over helping. And part of it is the blow by is happening so quickly. It's not like I take 1-2 dribbles as an offense player and then I get around you. It's jab and go. So you're constantly scrambling on the help side to do the right thing, but it feels like guys are over helping, and then their positioning is terrible. So, I'm thinking of a play where Caleb just couldn't keep anybody in front. And I think it was Ross, left-hand punch in the center of the key. Ajayi's on the elbow. He turns his chest, is facing Ross, and he's coming over to help. Ball gets kicked out. I forget who took the shot. Second half, they're in that zone because they can't guard the ball. And Caleb is so far extended up towards the center line, half court, trying to be aggressive. He's playing hard. I mean, it's the most basic play ever. He loses sight entirely of Lewis. And so when he turns to where Lewis was, he's not there. He's got to cover 15 feet. Lewis makes the three. And then, it was one of those things where it was shocking to see St. Mary's struggle with the zone because it's not a complicated defense to run. Yeah. And they started figuring it out. And what they did was they ran Lewis along that baseline, and he got 2 or 3 really good looks on the right wing where either Hickman or Battle got lost. And then you're having Ike having to run out there. So if you can guard somebody, you can absorb the offensive miscues or the stretches where you can't score. And St. Mary's effectively was trying to gift you the game. 5 of 15 from free throws in the first. You're down 8. I mean, it was a miracle given how poorly you were guarding. And St. Mary's just could not make their free throws. It was just a bizarre game. And to me, that's the end of the conversation. If we can't guard, we're in for a world of hurt because that's the one thing this league has is they've got guards that can score.
And they got skill. Their skill.
Yeah.
Shooting. All right. I'm going to disagree a little bit. Well, I agree with what you said. I'll put it that way first. True, defensively. But 2 things. That zone baffled St. Mary's, and I'm still not sure why.
It did. Yep.
It did. And it started, I think they threw it out there later in the first half when, they're getting
they did.
Three. And they went with a ton in the second half. And St. Mary's, well, let's put it this way. It's 49-45. Huff hits the bucket inside. Just under 10 minutes to go in the half. So from that point on, and that's why I say, the defense, and I give the credit to the zone that they were even in it. If they'd have not gone to the zone, they probably get in.
No, yeah, you had to do something. I agree.
But what I'm saying is 49 points with 10 minutes left. They finished with 58. That's 9 points in 9 minutes. Almost
fair
10.
Enough, Jim.
And St. Mary's scores 17, 16, whatever it is, 17. And 2 of those are by the way, free throws at the end of the game.
Right.
I mean, it was like each team was waiting for the other to take this by the throat and win it. And so that's why I cannot dismiss the offense for some reason can look great for 25 minutes or 35 minutes. But in these tight games, they have just had a real problem executing, scoring, and finishing games. Happened at Oregon State. Now they did get 2 threes to get it to overtime. But Benny hit the one and then Ike hits the other. But this probably isn't your formula, that you're looking for. Most of the times, I'm sure they're looking for Ike inside or running the regular offense. And so that is one thing that's been a constant in this. And I talked to Augustus Marshallonis afterwards, and he said, the zone. He said, we're going to work on that all week. He said, we usually are not thrown by that thing. And he said there was some wrinkle with it, I think, or something.
Well, it looked like St. Mary's was staying, or Gonzaga was in the zone. Some possessions they never got out of it, but then you did see them mix in. They matched up, and and I think that threw them a little bit. Yeah.
But anyway, that you're right. The zone was almost we tried to guard them the way we'd planned, but they're scoring. They hit 6 out of their first 8 threes.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
What's the first thing you're going to scout against Gonzaga defensively?
What's the first thing you're going to scout?
The pick and roll, right? High pick and roll with you, right?
Yeah.
Second thing, I got to think about that. If you and I are if you and I are prize fighters, and we've got a 12 round bout, and 80% of my punches are jabs, you're probably going to figure it out after I hit you in the face a few times and adjust what you're doing.
Yeah.
It just feels like there's a predictability to what Gonzaga does
after the pick and roll. Yeah.
But it's the same thing. It's just it's high pick and roll. And as amazing as Ryan is, I mean, he is an all-timer for Gonzaga at that position. As amazing as Graham is. I mean, look, these are their numbers in the last 8 games. Last 8 games, EK, 26 minutes a game, 21 points, 8 rebounds, shooting 65% from the field, 80% from the free throw line. Yeah. Nembhard is averaging 10 points, 11 assists, 45% from the field, 41% from 3.
Yeah, hit a huge 3 in that game.
Yeah. 2 turnovers, but a steal and a half a game. Yeah. So almost net zero, coughing it up. You know, those are their 2 guys. Yeah. And so it just feels predictive to me. And there's no diversity to where the offense is coming. And the hardest part, I think, one of the hardest things to do in anything, if you're, I think, in a leadership position, it can be business, it can be athletics, but athletics, it's very pronounced. Dependability is a skill set that you want to be able to rely on as a coach. And I looked at this game, and it was all about the others. So Marshallonis and Saxon don't have great games. They're clearly outplayed by EK and Nembhard. But then I look at the others for St. Mary's. Lewis, Wessel, Barrett, and Ross all had their own moments. But 33 points between that group. They made 6 threes. They drew 10 fouls, which tells me they're in their limited roles. They're playing aggressively, they're assertive, and they're playing with confidence. Then I look at Gonzaga: Greg, Hickman, Battle, Ajayi, Stromer, and Huff. And I forgot to add Emmanuel to this when I looked at it. Yeah. 19 points between those 6.
Yeah, and Emmanuel had 4.
Okay, so 23 points minus 10.
The other 7, yeah.
Emmanuel hits. Emmanuel didn't make a 3. So the 1 3, 1 of 7 from that group from the 3-point line, they drew 5 fouls. So to me, the offensive struggles is the weight of the world is on Nembhard. The only other player that can consistently get his is EK. Yeah. And you, quite frankly, have no idea what you're going to get from anybody else on any given night. You might have Hickman go, Hickman's been their 3rd most consistent, and I love Nolan. I think the story of his career from where he started to where he is now, he's become a very good college basketball player. But, I mean, you look at Battle, Jim, outside of the OSU game, 3 of the last 4 games, he has 2 points. 1 of 9 from the field, is 0 of 5 from 3, 4 of 6 turnovers. Yeah. And that just, to me, it was just, and that, I don't have an answer to that. I don't know why these others aren't consistently, Greg will get you 22 in Portland, and then he has a week where he's just not as effective. I mean, like, that's really hard to coach, to game plan around.
No, and it's been the case throughout. And we've talked to Mark about this a lot, is you don't know who is going to be the 3rd, 4th, 5th scorer. Sometimes, I mean, you might have 2 starters go scoreless, and then you might have Huff off the bench get 19. So the consistency of, they have 6 guys averaging double figures. I think there's one other team in the country that has it.
No,
but
it doesn't feel like that.
And that's why. And I asked Mark after the game. I said, Graham and Ryan just carried you in the first half, or you're down 20 basically, and then throughout the long stretch of the second half, carried you. And I said something to the effect, you needed some others to jump in. And he said, yeah. He said, we need, what you need is to find somebody who can deliver in those games, those kind of close, tight games against good competition. And their next best option to me after the pick and roll with EK is the pick and roll with Huff when he replaces EK.
Right.
Because he
Right.
will score the ball.
But it's the same. My point is, it's the same action.
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah,
But I'm just saying that's probably their second best play beyond the first. So, and it's just the finding. I think they'd be so much better off if all these guys scored 8, 9, 10 points and you knew it every game, but it's not. It's 12 for 22 and then scoreless. And so anyway, I don't know. And I don't know what to think anymore of the final minutes other than I will say this: St. Mary's, although Graham has had his great success against them in several of these matchups, they are pretty good on guarding pick and roll because of how physical Marciulionis is, navigating screens, and just kind of has that ability to do what all St. Mary's guys do. He can kind of ride you down the lane without fouling you because he's strong. Saxon's the same way. I mean, Saxon and Ike must be full of bruises after.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Saxon is a physical defender. Every play, it's bump, bump, bump. They're a lineman.
Well, but and then you bring Wessel in. He's 7'1". They listen at 275. I mean, he is a mountain.
Yeah.
Right. And so you think, well, they did a good job. They pinned the fifth foul on Saxon, and you thought that might be the game.
Yeah.
And then here he comes, a guy who's averaging, what is he averaging here? 9 minutes a game on the year.
Yeah.
And he came in as if what I just was impressed with Jim was like the confidence that he had when he came in, and they didn't change anything about what they were doing. And he's just stout, and he bothered Graham. He bothered them in the first half, bothered him in the second half. He had a big time block, made his free throws. And
he's like
you're right,
85% free throw.
I know, it's crazy. Then you watch him shoot, and you're like, I can't believe that goes in. And you're right. For Graham, I mean, he played 31 minutes. I mean, that's 31 minutes with. You have to carry Saxon and Wessel around, like they're not finesse
both ends
guys.
of the floor. You're working your tail off.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm not dismissing the offensive challenges, especially late, and it does feel like the narrative, or rather that if you're the story you're writing for each one of those games is not. It's not you're not taking the stories from the previous games and tweaking it for that game. It's like you have to write a new story every time. I get that. There just seems to be something that goes off the rails. But, I don't know. It's another game where down the stretch, it looked like Ryan was gassed. And, 40 minutes, he's got the ball. I mean, his usage rate, I mean, I don't know who tracks that, but, that's a way to understand, how much the offense it goes through a guy. I mean, it must be as high as anybody in the country. He starts, the shot's short. He turns it over. I don't know. They have to find a way to figure it out. But I guess I'll go back to my original point, which is all of that is you can absorb all of that much easier if you know you can guard. And right now they just have to have so many questions on that end. I mean, watching that again, just the three. I mean, they're giving up naked threes against a zone. I mean, that's the point of the zone, right? Is to eliminate, challenge 3-point shooters, and force them to have to try to pass it in. I mean, and then they just couldn't rebound out of the zone. I mean, the way that St. Mary's back taps those offensive rebounds, it's a real challenge. So, I just think they've got a lot of questions, and I know that Graham, if they were playing UConn on Thursday, or Duke or someone, I know what Ryan's going to do. I generally know what Graham's going to do. I mean, UConn's not a good example. He struggled against the Huskies, but nonetheless, you know what I'm saying. You kind of know.
He's had like 4 or 5 down games all year.
Right. I mean, it's a long year.
18 have been huge games.
Yeah. I don't know who else is going to play well in that game.
Neither does Mark.
And that's a problem.
Honest, neither do the fans, because it changes, every game. And I think that's one of the things that's, been a season-long issue. So, the Gales Gonzaga and St. Mary's shared the title 2 years ago. St. Mary's won it solo last year. Now they're 3 games up in the loss column over San Fran and Gonzaga. So they could be on their way to back-to-back solo titles. First time, I believe, in school history. 3 straight years with at least a share of the tournament, of the regular season title. They've won 3 of the last 4 against Gonzaga. They've won 5 of the last 9. So these are not one-time, one-off, fluky deals. They've had some great teams, and this one I think is very interesting. Their defense is legit, and their offense is a little better than a lot of St. Mary's offenses, particularly if Mikey Lewis. You want to talk about a guy who comes in with confidence. I mean, he only made 4 of 12 the other day, but he felt like he killed the Zags. He just making, I think he made 4 threes. He was 4 of 12 from 3, 6 of 18 overall.
Yeah.
6 of 18, 33%, and he killed them with a couple of threes that one I think was on a second chance. But anyway, the question is we always seem to we feel like the Zags, man for man, talent for talent, who goes on to the NBA, all those things, the Zags probably have an edge, but maybe that isn't as big a gap as we think. And certainly with this St. Mary's team, I mean, the kid from Arizona is pretty good. He didn't play great the other night, but he's pretty
started
good.
well, but yeah, he's pretty good. Started well, but
Marciulionis is a very good college player. Those 2 guards, you can see what's coming down. Ross, Lewis are going to be the guards next year. Both very good, versatile, shoot it, drive it.
Dynamic with the ball.
You're going to have Moraskis be your 4. You're going to have Vessels at the 5. They got another kid, McKeever, who I think is even bigger, taller.
Well, yeah, and he's gonna find a
guy.
transfer. There should be some new dude from Australia. I mean,
and they got Hardaway, Penny Hardaway's son, who's going to be more of a guy. I mean, you can see what's coming down the road. Are the Zags? Where's this rivalry at? I mean, is this thing flipped a little bit? Obviously, the numbers point that way, but obviously, history and tradition is completely on Gonzaga's side. It's been way in their favor in the win-loss. But are we just kind of overreading that? The Zags send this guy to the pros, so they should be winning, head to head. It's a college game. It's not who's had better on the draft boards and those kind of things. It's the execution game. When you play St. Mary's, you have to execute. They're not going to let you score 80, 85 points. They're not going to let you do it. You're not going to have enough possessions. And you got to be so mentally tough to deal with that. Guarding for 25 seconds. Oh, they got the offensive rebound. I got to guard for another 15 or 20. What do you make of the rivalry, the state of it right now, and are things turning in your mind at all?
Well, the first thing I thought was, man, it'd be cool if they played in the non-conference when Gonzaga's in the Pac-12, but I doubt that's going to happen. Look, I mean, results matter. I mean, they do in anything, and right now the results say that St. Mary's has been a better club when it comes to WCC play, the last 24, 36 months. I mean, Gonzaga still has the most depth and talent. I mean, I'm not, you're not looking at these teams 6th, 7th, 8th guy, I don't think, and thinking to yourself, they're on the same level as, the Huffs and Stromers and now Battles of the world. The difference is, Jim, Gonzaga doesn't have pros. We had pros.
This crew, yeah.
I mean, last year, I know Anton was a very late 2nd-round pick, but, we just haven't had that top shelf NBA talent for a while. And there's nothing wrong with that. What we have a collection of, at least on paper, and certainly in the case of Ike and Nemhard, very, very good high major college basketball players. And that is enough to win.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you're trying to win a national championship, I mean, it would be a fascinating exercise I think if you were to go and look at Final Four rosters, and certainly teams that played in championship games, they have NBA players on those teams, guys who, and they may be a freshman that plays 12 minutes a game.
Yeah, see Gonzaga 2017, see
right.
Gonzaga 2021. Yeah,
but they're nonetheless NBA caliber athletes, NBA caliber talents,
and
we
multiple,
don't have,
usually 2 or 3.
Right, and we don't have that,
yeah.
And that's okay. Right, you can still win if the counter to that is, well, we've got 8 guys who are high level college basketball players playing against your 4 and your 2 young guys who might get overwhelmed in the moment. We've played 130 games each, but yeah, the talent difference between where St. Mary's is today and Gonzaga is today is not nearly as wide as it was even 3 years ago, let alone 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. Where that team that lost to Baylor had how many pros? You had Kispert, you had Suggs, Ajayi got a cup of coffee in the league. Nembhard, thank you. The following year, I think you had Stromer.
Yeah, Timmy was the one who hasn't played in the NBA.
Right. I'm sorry. You had Strother. You had Holmgren. I mean, you can just go back and see Hachimura, Clark. I mean, real NBA prospects, like lock first round picks. We don't have that.
Yeah.
And as a result, the margin for error is a bit less, or a lot less, depending on your perspective, than it used to be. Yeah. But I still think Gonzaga on the aggregate has more talent. But so much of this, and what's really confusing to me, Jim, is I think we both felt, given how much they were bringing back, that the cohesiveness of this group,
experience,
they were starting on second base. They all, they're bringing in Michael and Caleb, but it felt like they were real plug and play, and they fit a specific need. There was no redundancy really with what they did compared to anybody else on the roster. It felt like they were going to be easy fits, and that they were going to have this competitive advantage. But I mean, watching them Saturday night, and quite frankly, watching them for large stretches over the last month in some of these games, it still feels like a team that's trying to figure out how to play with each other. And that surprises me. Maybe you've been doing this longer than me.
Does me too.
I don't know.
Does me too, especially when you see it on day one. Just take Baylor apart. I mean, you just thought, the perfect fits with the transfers, the experience. They have shooting. They have 2 inside guys. They have one of the best points in the country. You wouldn't expect to see the struggles. I did not. We've talked about it. I did not expect to see them struggle in crunch time like this. Didn't expect them to have 7 losses. I'm surprised by all that, given what they have, who they had back, and what they added. So, now it's, the Zags, I think they're not changing their minds or their goal. They want to still try to, catch St. Mary's, but they only got 1 game with St. Mary's. They're going to need a lot of help to catch St. Mary's, and they're going to have to be clean to the finish line to do it. The second seed is probably the more realistic goal at this point. With that, you get the bye into the semifinals at the tournament. But let's get a quick thought on what's coming up this week.
Yep.
Loyola Marymount's coming in. The Zags, I think, beat them 26 or something, 28 down in LA. Played very well in that game. Scored 96, if my memory's right. But I'll tell you, the Loyola Marymount has got it together a little bit. Now they think they've reeled off 4 or 5 wins in a row.
Yeah, 5.
Not against the upper crust, so to speak, of the conference, but I think they did get Santa Clara, held them to 54 in a win. So they're obviously playing better. Do you expect a better run, a better contest, competitive contest on Thursday, or do you see the Zags licking their wounds and kind of getting back on the beam here and trying to get some momentum going here for the stretch run?
Well, look, the next, certainly starting Thursday, you've got 4 games, one against San Francisco, but the other 3 against the bottom half of the league. I mean, it's certainly a couple weeks stretch you've got to win out. Give credit to LMU. That's a good win against Santa Clara at home, and they've played, what is it? At home, San Diego, at Pacific, home Portland, and at San Diego.
The bottom 3 or 4. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I'll be honest with you, Jim. I don't know. I mean, I have a lot of faith in guys like Graham and Ryan. Certainly, Mark is as good a coach as we've seen. And this is not the first time he's had to shepherd a group through some adversity. So my instinct is to say that this group's going to have a good response on Thursday, but they gotta figure things out on the defensive end, and I think they need these other guys to somehow get some confidence, and that may be what's going on, and maybe there's a lack of confidence going on with guys deeper into rotation, but it's and the tough thing too, Jim, is. And I don't know if you'll have this in the back of your mind, but you should beat LMU pretty easily at home. And I would expect someone's going to go off. Huff's going to get 25, or Battle's going to go off again, or Greg's going to do well, or Stromer's going to get 13 and look really, really good. But it's been a long enough stretch now where I feel like, for me personally, I got to see that in a game that's tight against a team that could beat you. Before I have any real takeaways about where this group is. So I still think we're gonna be on this podcast next Monday and certainly have a couple games to talk about in the week ahead. But I still think all the questions and concerns that you and I are having today are going to be there next week.
I think I think kind of shows. I mean, you see him against Oregon State, and you think that it's in there. It's still in there. It can come out, and it can still be that team you saw against Baylor and operate at a high level at both ends of the court. But then you kind of see them struggle at Pepperdine, and who knows what happens with LMU and Pacific this week. Pacific is Saturday's game. Strange things happen in that building. They've had some dogfights. The
last few years. Yeah. I've called those. I'm not calling this one, but I've called those in the past. Yeah. Oddly competitive games.
I think the challenge there is going to be exactly what we've talked about ad nauseum here. Is Pacific plays a lot of guards. I think their top 4 or 5 scorers are not necessarily guards, but guards and 6'5", 6'6", ball handler, create type of players. Can they slow those guys down? Can they hold off dribble penetration? Those kind of things. That's probably the job number 1 for him. What do you see Saturday night? The concern points, or if there are any, going in?
Yeah, look, I mean that you're hitting it perfectly. I think that's what everybody should be watching starting Thursday, is how do they keep the ball in front. St. Mary's, their guards aren't uber athletic, explosive, right? But they're very fundamental and they know how to play. And Gonzaga couldn't keep them in front. And can they keep LMU's guards in front? Can they keep Pacific guards in front? Or we see the same breakdowns? I don't know. I'd be interested to see how much of that zone we see against some of these teams. If this, is the staff committed to that as a defensive concept because they think that it will bear fruit, or was that kind of like a break glass in case of emergency idea against the Gales? So. Yeah, I'm not trying to be overly pessimistic. I'm not. I mean, I look at college basketball these days. I mean, other than Auburn clearly feels like they are the best team in the country. Duke's playing as well as anybody. I look at some of these other SEC teams and their physicality. Talk about guard play. I'd be anxious for Gonzaga in those matchups, but. I look at Carolina, I look at Kansas, I look at lots of these brand name teams that are all having kind of these fits and starts. It still feels to me like when you get to March, it's going to be wide open. I mean, Connecticut, same thing. I mean, they had a good win at Marquette over the weekend, but they've lost a couple, if not 3, in the Big East already. it's going to be a wide open tournament. And to what I think we should be looking for as we kind of hit the home stretch here with another month or so left in the regular season is, are we seeing a group that's, getting the improvements that they need to make are going to be obvious to see, right? This isn't a group that's tweaking around the margins. I think this is a team that's got major overhauls to make defensively in particular, and they have to get these other guys feeling better about how they're playing and playing more consistently. We're going to see if that's trending towards that by the time we get to March 3rd.
Yeah.
So, and if they can turn that corner and start playing well again, I still think there's plenty of optimism about them being able to make a run. And if they make those improvements, we're not going to be talking about them on a bubble. Yeah. And so there's still a lot of season in front of them, but it kind of feels like it's now or never a little bit. You got to make these. You got 2 weeks here where you've got opponents that you can tweak some things and probably still win these games. So San Francisco aside, this next 2 weeks are when you're going to make some changes because, quite frankly, you look at their home stretch.
The way it finishes,
they're at the Cougs, St. Mary's at home, at Santa Clara, and San Francisco at home.
Yeah.
So you got 2 weeks here to really figure it out.
Well, like I said, it's in there. We see it come out from time to time, but not near enough consistency to, for the fan base to feel great comfort at this point. But it's still in there. We'll see if they can bring it out. One last thing on St. Mary's. Their top 4 scores, if I'm looking at it right, were held under their season average. Now, it might have been by a point or 2 points. Talking Maroscus, Barrett, Saxon, and Goose, Marshallones. All 4 under their season averages. They shoot 38% from the field. If you'd have told me that before the game, and EK's 24 and Ryan's 12 assists, I'm thinking 15-point win. And they got. Now, those guys all contributed. I mean, Augustus had 9 assists. Right. Saxon did his thing on the glass and defensively.
Barrett did too. Barrett had Barrett had 5 offensive rebounds.
Yeah, and the 6, maybe even 6th and 8th man, Vessels being an 8th because I think Hardaway might play more than him, and Mikey Lewis. Those are the guys who end up, making the biggest plays.
It's the others.
Deciding the game.
Jim, it's the my favorite player growing up was Shaq, and he has that famous line about the others. Winning a championship, it's about the others, right? Oh. Especially at home. But you need other. It's not just your superstars. It's not just EK and Nemhard. You need the others to step up, and you need to know what they're going to do from night to night. It's not to say I know exactly Ben Gregg's going to give me 10 points a game, right? But I know my guards they're going to defend. They're not going to turn it over. They're going to take good shots. And if you know all these parts of the formula, you have confidence in that they'll be done. Yeah. Then you'll have consistency with production.
I've heard a coach call that the knowns.
The knowns. Okay.
What you're going to get from guys.
Yeah.
That was an amazing thing about the 2017 team and the 2021 team. I mean, their off days were still, it was a small dip. Just a business-like, completely, take care of business every time out.
I remember that 16-17 team calling the game at Pacific. Pacific was awful, and you would have thought they were playing a top 10 team. Their execution, how hard they played.
Yeah, there was no dips, no valleys. Yeah.
But NBA guys on that team.
Yeah.
And, Nigel is as good a guard. Real talent, but that approach, and maybe that we're wrapping this up, and maybe we pick that up later in the season. Maybe it's more about a mindset and approach. I don't know. But we'll find out.
Well, they've got a lot of seniors, a ton of seniors, 5th-year seniors, regular seniors.
Yeah.
that finish line is arriving. So I would think that,
and they don't have a freshman playing for them.
yeah.
So they all got at least 1 year under their belt. Like it's
now the time is of the essence for those seniors, especially. I would think, you know, I know they're all in, but that finish line's arriving. They're probably going to have to dial it up here to get what they want out of this season. So, hey, that's going to do it. Hope you enjoyed it, Foxy. I always do chatting with you. Christy Burns, thank you very much. We'll be back next Monday. I'll post this on spokesman.com. You can find it on YouTube and all the Apple podcasts, wherever you listen. We appreciate you joining us every Monday. Come back next Monday and join us again. Thanks for joining us today.